Apology and Plato's Credo. The Apology and the Credo. In these dialogues, we find Socrates brought up against charges of corrupting the youth and not believing in the gods of the state. Now, he's got a set of accusers that are present in court that day with him. But, as the point that I want to make is, these accusers are not too terribly worrisome to Socrates, and what we find in both the Apology and the Credo is a rather incisive criticism of a particular theory of, to define it loosely, even justice. Right? It's hard to even call what we see in the way of the decision-making process in Socrates' trial. It's hard to call that justice. Right? Because as he points out right at the beginning of his trial, he's not worried about his set of accusers that showed up today. The set of accusers he's really worried about are those who accuse him from the shadows, from the background, who have talked to the 501 people in the jury, calling Socrates a sophist, right? Calling him somebody who is not to be trusted, somebody who attempts to make the weaker side of the argument appear to be the stronger. So, the issue here is not so much that Socrates doesn't believe in the gods of the state and that he is a corrupter of the youth. The issue that he wants to bring to the forefront is this idea that justice in Athens amounts to a popularity contest. Now, as I mentioned, 501 jurors. Can you picture yourself on a jury of that sort? Somebody is brought up on charges. You and 500 other people hear the evidence and have to decide what the sentence ought to be given the outcome of the trial. Right? How is it even possible to debate about the evidence, to have an argument with your fellow jurors about what the evidence really, well, basically the trial, right, and the way it went down is all 501 would hear both sides of the case and then vote, guilty or innocent, right? And then the accusers would suggest a sanction or a punishment if it's a guilty verdict, and the defendant would have the opportunity to counter that with another sentence. Everybody would vote again, and then the sentence would be carried out. So, what we find is a situation in which the people deciding about the evidence don't really have a whole lot of access to the evidence themselves. They just get a yes or no vote twice. Right? So, right from the start, Socrates wants to, well, first off, complain that he's not given enough time to really make his case to this second set of accusers, which are the really dangerous ones. And he wants to point out about the very structure of the trial that it doesn't really pride this kind of deep, rational investigation. What it relies on is people exerting their opinion. Right? And that's why Socrates' first set, the older set of accusers, is more worrisome to him than the second set. So, in terms of the evidence brought against him about him being a corrupter of the youth and not believing in the gods of the state, like I say, those are fairly easy arguments to knock down. He shows that the entire reason he is such a pain in the butt to the Athenians is because he's obeying the gods. What's more, he's got this little voice in the back of his head. Right? When you're done screening this video, Google Magnum PI and see if you are able to get the little voice in the back of his head, some sort of reference to it, right? It's what Magnum had was a Socratic daemon, right? A little voice in the back of his head that would chirp up whenever things weren't adding up. So for Magnum, it helped him solve crimes. For Socrates, he's got this little voice in the back of his head that helps him make good arguments, or at least prevents him from making bad arguments, right? And he considers this daemon as something akin to the gods. So if you believe in something akin to the gods, you must believe in the gods. Right? If you believe in horsely things, you must believe in horses. Right? If you believe in horse grooming, horsemanship, that sort of thing, you can't believe in those things without believing in horses. Right? So, if Socrates believes in something akin to the gods, then he must believe in the gods. And what's more, it's this argument about him corrupting the youth. Not so much the point, fairly easy to knock down. Right? So, what we want to focus on here is Socrates' general position. Right? Socrates' general position, including these ideas, why he was the wisest man in Athens, the Socratic dicta, right? The three propositions that sum up Socrates' moral position. This argument about the gadfly, I'll go over that today as well. And this idea that we shouldn't fear death, we should only fear that which we know to be bad. Right? These are the main ideas from the Apology that I want to bring up today. Right? So, from this we should get a rough idea of Socrates' theory of justice and his moral position, the basis of the criticism of the city-state of Athens that the Apology is bringing against the city-state of Athens. Now, what we get in the Credo here are three important ideas that we should wrap our mind around. In the Credo, we find two competing theories of justice. We find one offered by Credo, and then another offered by Socrates. Right? So the question, in what does justice consist, right, becomes the first and central question in the Credo. Now, to demonstrate, in fact, that Socrates believes that the charges against him should be carried out, right, it would be unjust to prevent these charges from being carried out. Socrates introduces two very important concepts in political philosophy. Right? And if you go to political philosophy conferences today, these two ideas still come up. They're still interesting. Right? And in fact, we'll take a look at those as well. So, basically, what we get in these two dialogues, by taking a look at these central ideas, is an overview of Socrates' moral position, an overview of Socrates' political position, and in fact we'll see a resolution to this sort of problem that Heraclitus, who said that there was lots of change, multiplicity and flux, and it all makes a certain kind of rational sense to us, and Parmenides, who claimed that being is simply that which is not, cannot be, and can't even be spoken of. So, since nothingness is unintelligible rationally, we use that nothingness when we go to explain change, multiplicity, or flux. So, there's a contradiction between these guys, and what Socrates wants to argue here, in very, very general terms, is that in the absence of our ability to lay claim to a big T sort of truth, we can still get at small t moral and political truths that ought guide our actions, if we make a couple of assumptions. So, this is what we're going to see from Socrates, the first intellectual martyr of the modern world. So, firstly, why is Socrates so poorly reputed? Right? Why don't people like Socrates? Well, if we think of ourselves in Athens, walking around the agora, and somebody like Socrates, this fairly ugly, barefoot, old man, comes up to us and asks us, what's justice? In what does the good life consist? And all of these questions, these fairly embarrassing questions, because these are pretty fundamental questions. What's happiness? What's the good life? What's justice? What's piety? These are questions that affect our lives daily. And this fairly ugly man, rather annoying, not making any claim to knowledge himself, just questioning your claim to knowledge, dissects each and every one of our responses to his questions and holds them unwaveringly to this rational standard, claiming that our beliefs on the subject should be supported by reasons. Well, fairly quickly, we would probably prove to be